When Jennair Gerardot killed Meredith Chapman and then herself, the story made international news.
Meredith was the boss of Jennair's husband, Mark, and they'd been having an affair for months.
But what led Jennair to this violent end?
And what happened in the aftermath?
We're doing a recap of Bad Thing on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time.
You know, Jeff, as we go into cold and flu season and I'm waiting for my shipment of super vitamins, I think there's no better way to keep my mind busy than to go to patreon.com/so much crime, so little time. Because if I decide to support a tiny little show just like ours, then I might even get an opportunity to chat to, well, us. So much fun. Also get some bonus content like outtakes, more Time Machine clips, and even get some exclusive swag like t-shirts for the show, maybe some hats. We've revamped our whole Patreon setup, so please go visit, see what you'd like to do, and just, remember, we're a small show and we'd love your support. Thank you so much. Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff. And before we start, just a quick warning.
Warning.
This episode will have spoilers for Bad Thing. We're going to discuss the whole series.
Yeah, we are. If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
We also put a link for Bad Thing in our show notes.
But before we jump into the full recap, let's give you a bit of a reminder about the show. This podcast was released in 2021. The host is Barbara Schroeder. It's got 6 episodes, but 2 bonus episodes that I would highly encourage you to listen to. And each episode is about 45 minutes in length. But Jeff, tell us a little bit about the story up until the end of episode 1 that we have covered so far.
Yeah, okay. So episode 1 kind of gave us the outline of the events that the whole rest of the series is about. So basically there's this woman, Jennair Gerardot, and her husband, Mark. They had been married for about 24 years. Mark started a new job at the University of Delaware. They've been living down in, I think, South Carolina. And Jennair suspected that he was having an affair with his new boss, Meredith Chapman. So Jennair started this super elaborate surveillance operation, recording, tracking Mark. And she was also recording videos of herself. And it was sort of documenting her having some kind of emotional breakdown. And it culminates in Jennair murdering Meredith and then killing herself. And at the end of the episode, we hear a little bit about how Mark eventually puts out a book about what happened and starts going on TV to talk about it. And that's where it ends. So, Dee, we have a lot to discuss with this one. I have many thoughts, many questions, many reflections.
Did you listen to the bonus episodes?
Yeah, I think the bonus episodes are significant here and I think worth talking about. But before we get there, can we table that for a second? Although I have a couple of framing questions I'd like to start with that will involve the bonus episodes. I would like to talk about at least 3 of the main people. I mean, really, this podcast is primarily about Jennair, Mark, Meredith. Those are the 3 people at the center of it. There's also Dr. Ramani and our host, Barbara, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on them. But I think something that I brought up I think I brought this up in the preview episode, is what do we think of Mark? What do we think of Jennair? What do we think of Meredith? Now that we've heard the whole thing, I want to come back to those questions and what are your impressions of these 3 people? And how did that maybe change as you listen to that? Because I feel like for me, it changed, or it wobbled up and down. What do you think? Pick one.
I'm like, I have so many thoughts. How long do you want me to speak for? Okay, who will I start with? Let me start with Jennair.
Okay.
So I think it was discussed, I felt, quite often, or at least it kind of led you into the thought, I think, of having sympathy or maybe empathy for Jennair quite often in this podcast. which is so fascinating. I think it was discussed in one of the bonus episodes how it's quite rare for you to have this sympathy and empathy for the murderer.
Yeah.
In this case. Yeah. And yet I couldn't help but have it. But I definitely felt, I'm not going to say less sympathy or empathy for her, but I definitely felt more maybe, I ended up feeling more sympathy and empathy for Mark and Meredith as the podcast went on. And not because of anything they did, but probably more because of the more I heard from Jennair, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to say from what she said, I felt less sympathy or empathy for her, but I definitely felt more for them. I felt that there was more. It was just so convoluted. I think there was definitely one quote, and it was reset again in one of the bonus episodes that Dr. Romani had about, is it in a tragedy or in an evil, you only see the tip of the iceberg. And I thought that was quite fascinating because in episode 1, we really only saw that tip. We heard about the murder and we heard about the affair, but it was just so layered.
Yeah.
So I definitely, I suppose I was surprised at myself feeling that more sympathy and empathy for Mark and Meredith than I had anticipated. In saying that, until the very last bonus episode where Mark joins Barbara and Dr. Romani, I was still disgusted by him because he knew her. Like, if you've been married to someone for that long, you know their vulnerabilities. You know what you have a fairly good idea what their reactions are going to be. Maybe not to this extent, but you kind of have that idea. And I just felt like, you know, your person to have had this betrayal was one thing, but to have heard the recordings, to have heard her so often just say, tell me, just tell me. And him just not. And then him being like, she nearly seemed close to giving up. And then him being like, oh, but I still do hold you in my heart. And she said it to him a few times, like, you've cracked the door open. And like, he kept doing that. And that to me was just, it was so weak on his part. And I did think that they went too easy on him, even in the bonus episode, because it was like, he said that and that's just left. Like, why is no one saying, you know, actually, I feel like a question came in and they kind of mentioned it, but never leaned into it too much. He didn't want to be left alone.
He didn't want to be alone. No, that was clear. Well, he didn't want to be alone. He
Meredith
also didn't want to make a
and
decision.
Jennair are giving him so much time.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised to hear you say that you felt more kind of sympathy for him. I don't know. Dr. Romani said something about how...
Just when I say more, can I just clarify? I mean more than I did
0?
after episode 1, which was none.
Okay, that's
just
fair.
To make that very clear. If anyone says more, I'm not saying more than Jennair or more than Meredith. I'm saying more than I had after episode 1, which was nothing.
He seems to be the person who, first of all, he's the one who's still here to tell his side of the story, which is an unfair advantage. And there's a lot of reasons to sort of hate him and feel like he is the cause of all of this. And if he had just made a decision, been willing to face some conflict, be the bad guy to one of the 2 women in his life, he could have avoided 2 people getting killed. That's one way of looking at this. And I think that's totally reasonable. That's kind of how I look at this. I do give him a little bit of credit for going on that bonus episode, kind of responding to the criticism of him, talking to Barbara and Dr. Romani. I mean, we talked about this in the preview, he gave Barbara, the host, access to things that make him sound pretty terrible. Like, basically access to recordings of him having an affair, lying to his wife, boldly lying to her, gaslighting her. He participated. He was a willing participant in something that he gets sort of vilified for. Not sort of. He gets vilified for by a lot of the audience. So I think we talked about, like, why would someone do that? Like, why would he do that? I don't know. But like, and I feel like too,
No,
my
that
question was about,
asked in the bonus episode. Was like, why did you do it? Like, and you know, every time you go on to a show or do an interview, like it's all been brought back up, and it's not just brought back up for you, it's brought back up for Meredith's family, it's brought back up for Jennair's family.
Yeah, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the answer he gave?
I mean, I felt like all his answers were about like, oh, me and my growth and me and my whatever and me and my trauma. How hard it is for me. I still don't feel like even with the fact that he was gaslighting her, I felt like when they questioned him, he was kind of like, well, you see, it was so hard for me. I didn't want to make the wrong decision. You fucking made the decision. You made the decision when you started the affair. You made the decision when you continued it. You made the decision when you refused to answer very basic questions. And you made the decision in your consistently keeping her there because you knew she'd stay there. You made that decision time and time and time and time again. You made that decision.
Mm-hmm. For months and months and months.
Months. And the deceit and the lies. And he was like, I can't believe she was following me. How dare she? I'm like, you were fucking lying to her. Like, she did what she did and she needs to own that action. But he created. Any time your friend ever gets with someone and says, I have a crazy ex-girlfriend or I have a crazy ex-boyfriend, you're like, chances are, we got to take a breath and assume. No? It also felt very juvenile, like his reaction, his whole like, I'm conflict averse. Like, I don't like arguments. Okay, who fucking does? But like, you've been in a relationship for 25 years, you don't like arguments, but you've shagged other people throughout that 25 years. Seems like you want to do what you want to do, and then you want to avoid having a conversation about it.
I think that's exactly it. I think that's a good way of summarizing it. He wanted to have his cake and eat it too, right? Like he wanted to have everything and not face any real consequences for it, not make any hard decisions. Just have his wife still be there.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that she was wholly dependent on him.
Yeah. He
knew she didn't have a job. She didn't have a source of income. She had sort of built her whole identity around him. He had moved her around the country. She was in a place where, and she had a bad relationship with her family. So, I mean, she had, and for obviously this was a bad thing, but she had made her whole identity around her relationship to him. And that gave him an unbelievable amount of control and power. And he abused that power. And I also feel like he abused that power with Meredith. I feel like those conversations that we heard of him, the conversations of him and Meredith that were secretly recorded, those are the ones where I felt kind of most awful about him. Because I heard a man uncomfortably telling this woman just whatever he thought she'd want to hear to keep him in her life. Mm-hmm. That to me felt so kind of shameless and gross. Yep. And I don't know, does he not recognize, or maybe he doesn't care, or I don't know. I would not want conversations like that of me out there, but he did. He did. Those are the hardest things, I think, for me. I mean, obviously the audio of Jennair was heartbreaking and awful to listen to. But I think some of those secretly recorded, as well as the conversations between him and Jennair where he's gaslighting her. We all know he's lying. That's the whole point, that he's lying. Also, like when he knew that she was recording him, he'd found the recording devices and that didn't stop him. That, to me, that's someone who just feels like he can just get away with it forever. And he will never face consequences. Yep.
And that's the thing, he has. Like, he can be like, I have to live with this every day. Did you notice him mentioning, I don't know, like I felt like he mentioned, there was very few people he mentioned in that bonus episode. This is probably a bit of a reach, but there was very few people he mentioned other than like Jennair and Meredith. Like the very start when he was like, oh, I listened to that episode 1, before I was going to work, and like I was just like staring at the wall. I found it so hard because it was obviously Jennair's voice. And it's like me, like I'm a narcissist. And then I went to my neighbor's house and I went to her house and I sat on her couch and I'm like,
her house.
I'm like, her
I caught
her
that.
house. Who's she?
Yeah. Oh, I
Who are you
definitely, like, I
leaning on
stopped.
now?
Yeah.
Because it's not a
Yeah.
man. And what degree of control do you have over this person?
Yeah.
Because that feels to me what this is all about. Like, it feels like he just wants control the entire time. And I think that was one of the big things for me in the bonus episodes that I got from it, was this idea that Dr. Romani was saying was, and I'm sure different what was she, psychotherapist?
I have her Wikipedia page up. She is a psychologist.
I'm sure there'd be, in her field, I'm sure there's so many different thoughts on this. But I would say her point about, if you're in a relationship or even a friendship, and there is this element of, if you do this thing, this person is going to, do something negative, whether it's to themselves or to someone else. You don't own that action.
Mm-hmm.
You own and are responsible for what you do, but like, if you need to remove yourself, you have to. And she said that it falls on deaf ears all the time, this and the other. And like, that was kind of an interesting thing to hear from someone. Like, obviously I know that, but like, it was just kind of interesting for me to hear. And at the same time, I felt like it was interesting to hear the idea of, I don't know, I felt like she was showing empathy for Mark in Mark's situation, and like how Mark must have felt maybe not seen or not whatevered. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I
Dr.
just felt
Romani.
like, I just felt like it was too much, though. Because like, yes, okay, maybe he didn't feel seen or heard, but like, use your words, like, and like, treat him as an adult and say, yeah, but like, why couldn't you have used your words to say, I want out? And then he says, well, I made a mistake. This was not a sole mistake. This isn't just one mistake.
No, it's a series. It's a pattern of mistakes.
And again, it's not an affair. It's an affair plus gaslighting. Someone is vulnerable because you know them inside out and upside down.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think that pissed me off more, is to use the person you know so well and use their insecurities and their vulnerabilities like in an attack mode. I think that's the thing that has upset me so much about this entire story. Obviously the murders, but like, sorry.
Sure. But I also feel like that is something that is such a common trait of long-term relationships, is that, I mean, a simpler way of saying that is people learn how to push each other's buttons. They know what triggers their partner. Yeah. And they sometimes use that for their own gain, or they use it poorly. And this is an extreme version of that. I did want to mention, as a quick aside, Dr. Romani, I looked her up right before we started recording, and I thought it was interesting. Her specialty is, well, it's personal development, but mainly she's written about and talked about narcissistic abuse. And a couple of titles of some of her books are It's Not You, Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People. Don't You Know Who I Am? How to Stay Sane in the Era of Narcissism. Entitlement and Incivility. And then Should I Stay or Should I Go? Surviving a Relationship with a Narcissist. So I just thought that was interesting, that like, this is an area, like, they talked a lot about narcissism. Like, there were some certain like psychology terms that we heard a lot of. I don't know. To your point about how Dr. Romani, treated Mark, I thought in I said this in the preview, that I felt like she was very balanced, and I was curious about why she was sort of diagnosing in a way someone who wasn't her patient, and I was really glad that they addressed that head on. And I thought she did, from my perspective, as a person who doesn't know anything about anything, I thought she did that in a very balanced way. You could perceive that as she was maybe too wishy-washy, but I perceive that as she was trying to be very judicious in using labels. She was trying to qualify what she was saying and what she knew and what she didn't know, and what it was fair to say and what it wasn't fair to say. But she was trying to sort of like provide a psychological perspective that I appreciated.
Do you think she went easy?
I thought she was a great addition. No, I don't think she went easy on him. I do think I am curious if she and Barbara, the host, would have gone on as easy on him if he wasn't such if he wasn't the crux of this podcast existing. Right? There's no podcast without his participation, without his handing over all of this audio, the letters, because we've listened to podcasts that don't have that, and they're not very good. So I am curious if that biased their presentation of him. I didn't really answer your question.
But then we didn't have we didn't have to have that last episode. And they said they tried to have it and they couldn't for various reasons. They didn't go into it. But now everyone's feeling more comfortable.
Oh, the episode, the Mark.
The Mark and Dr. Manny one. And so they'd already done the rest of the podcast because he'd listened to it. So I don't know if it's necessarily about the fact that he was... they had all the material at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't know.
And look, maybe I'm just being too harsh because I'm fuck the man. He's a prick. Maybe I need to tame down that. But it just felt to me that, I don't know. I go in, I went in the whole time. It just I felt cynical. I felt cynical, honestly, listening to him describing coming upon the bodies and seeing Meredith and thinking this and then seeing his wife and be my wife is here too, and then running over and hugging her, my wife. I was cynical. I was not that he couldn't have felt so sad and obviously upset in that situation, but I don't know. Even in that situation, would you not have been pissed off at Jennair?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just felt every time he answered a question, I felt every time he was describing a situation, we were getting a rose-tinted, Mark looks great situation. In all instances. The only time I felt we weren't is when we were hearing the audio.
I think that's fair. I think I agree with that. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I maybe agree with that. But
wow, we went on a full journey there. I think that's fair. I think I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that. I actually don't think I agree with that. That we went a full journey.
I told you I have complicated feelings about this podcast. I have a lot of emotions and thoughts, and so I want to talk about that moment, that episode. This is episode 5. It's called A Special Place in Hell. This episode, and I want to also at some point talk about the construction of this podcast because I think it's really interesting. But in that episode, we're basically hearing about the last few weeks and then that day. And I thought it was interesting how there were a lot of things I thought were really particularly interesting. How Mark seemed to be both in such denial about where Jennair was. And I don't know that I buy that Jennair was convincingly no one could have seen this coming. And maybe that's true. Who can really say? I just feel you're married to someone for 24 years. I feel you have a sense of when something has changed in them. When she goes from being such an anti-gun, such a pacifist, an animal lover, to someone who is going to a shooting range with a .357 Magnum. And I know he didn't know that she was doing that. I just feel if you are really paying attention, and I don't believe he was, I think he was focused on Meredith.
She hid it in the laundry basket, Jeff. For how long was he not doing the laundry?
Well, we know he wasn't because she was going through his underwear, looking for evidence. Now, to be fair, I could have hid a lot of things in the laundry in my house, and my wife would not find it. She doesn't touch the laundry. Yeah,
I suppose I actually do it all in my house as well. Or not all. But
let's test this. Let's both hide a weapon.
No.
I'm going to hide a weapon. You pick a weapon of your choice. Do you know who will find that? A child.
A child will find that.
All right. Let's hide a non-violent implement.
A microphone.
In the laundry and see how long. A microphone. Yeah. Okay. So this was, there were so many things that we heard about.
Sleep, by the way. They mentioned the fibroids and they were could that have impacted her? I was well, no one mentioned the sleep. This woman was not sleeping. Nobody mentioned the sleep.
She wasn't sleeping. That wasn't, yeah. That's not good for your mental health.
I we need it more than men.
Is that true?
Yeah. You know, our bodies do a hell of a lot more.
They were just like that episode, though, that episode 5. First of all, so talking about the podcast itself, I thought the podcast itself had a remarkable amount of detail and specificity. And I think this is a credit to Barbara Schroeder and her research and putting this podcast together. But there were just some really interesting details. Like, we should talk at some point about the cat. But also, like, Jennair, we found out that Jennair was the one who was responsible for their finances, and Jennair took the time to write down all the account information and passwords for Mark, which is such a thoughtful move. This is what sort of baffles me. And this and Dr. Ramani talked about this, about someone who is in sort of she said she's not like a psychopath. She's not like there's different types of labels.
That, though?
Why would you do that?
Yeah. Like, you want to hurt him.
Yeah, that's like the most helpful thing you could do, right? Like,
I don't know. I didn't understand that. Also, sorry, to go back a little bit.
Okay.
That day, they were going to meet for dinner. And he was like, oh, we were going to meet for a nice dinner. And like, I was there and I was waiting for her, and she messaged to say she was late. So I ordered appetizers, and I was like, this is not normal. Like, you were on the phone, like dropping over your favorite coffee to your mistress this morning, but you're going out for dinner with your... I think that's what baffled me. It isn't normal. He created this being normal, because this is part of the having the cake and eat it too. I will drop my coffee to Meredith's house because Meredith is my mistress. And then I'm going to go out for dinner with my wife because my wife needs to be kept happy. And also, there's just something about her that I just can't let go of. I just really like that she's so obsessed with me that if I say that I'm going to leave, like, she's like, no, I might throw myself out a window. And like, I kind of like that power, so I'm just going to keep that there. It's messed up.
You summed it up right there.
Yeah, and like, at no point is that kind of questioned. And I think that was what frustrated me a little bit about this podcast. I felt like it was so unique. I was completely addicted to it. I couldn't stop. I thought the story and the structure, and we will get into all that, was fascinating and quite unique and really addictive.
Yeah.
But I just felt that they went too soft. They had him there. They're the only person that they could have questioned. And I'm aware Jennair never got to stand trial for what she did. I know she never got to like see her judgment. I'm aware of that. But they have him there, and he's open to questions. Maybe he took some questions off the table. Maybe that was part of it. We don't know. But sure. Even in the first 6 episodes, I just didn't feel like there was enough of a question of, wait a second, even up until the end, he's playing both sides like this.
I think it was alluded to in different ways. Like, I think they talked about how he just needed to make a decision and he was unwilling to do that. They talked about how he was conflict averse. They talked about how, like, this stuff came up. I do think, and then I think if you sort of zoom out, neither one of us is sitting here saying, I think Mark really got a raw deal and he's really the one we should have sympathy for. I don't think anyone walks away from this podcast thinking that. And I wonder if having the audio and having just like the plot line of what happened is enough, and they didn't need to pile on to that by giving him more kind of shit than the inherent story gives him. He's the one who openly started this affair. He's the one who's sort of gloating about it. And that's the other thing. I feel like we heard him in this podcast in present day sort of bragging about getting this younger woman, bagging his boss. I feel like he was real proud of himself and wanted you all to know it. Did you pick up on that?
I'm not sure if I necessarily picked up on it. I think I was just so annoyed at him.
I think the story in episode 2 about how their relationship started was him as this older man who gets this job and then immediately kind of falls into this relationship. And the way he describes it, to me, that's a guy feeling real good about what he did. And feeling like he's a real winner. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Because also, the other person we heard from, and we should talk too about some of the other people that we hear from. So the other person in Mark's life that we hear from is Mike. Mike and Mark, that was a little confusing at times. But one of the first things we hear from Mike is that he said, actually, sorry, the Meredith thing was episode 3. The episode 2 was the Jennair Mark relationship story. And that's where we heard about Mike basically saying, Jennair's bad news. He didn't want Mark to marry her.
Did you understand that? Because it felt to me like Mike didn't want Mark to marry Jennair because Mark also liked other women, and Jennair didn't want him going out with his mates because, you know, when he goes away with his mates, he ends up in bed with another woman.
Look, D, I mean, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, you're supposed to just be like, oh, well, sure, continuously go away with them then?
You can't, like, stop yourself or say no.
Oh, my God. I just felt like Mike was more of like an enabler.
Mike was an enabler to an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
This was a very, like, there's another version of the story that is very bro-y, very, like, these guys who, yeah, are again, real proud of what they're able to do with women and how they're able to control these women and get what they want from them. Let's talk for a minute about Meredith. I want to talk about Meredith. So we got a little bit of her life, mostly about her career, a little bit about her husband and her relationship with her husband. What's your kind of take on her and kind of who she was, how she comes off here? She hates bananas.
I mean,
she's a runner.
Same. Like, I don't like bananas either, but like, imagine being like, oh
wait,
no,
I gotta put that on my
found
spreadsheet
the
of
one,
things.
Oh my God, the spreadsheet. I nearly got sick in my mouth. Imagine having to document all the things that you have in common with someone. I mean, like,
that
this
I found
cute.
to be one of the most
So
nauseating things.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So disgusting. Also, this idea that like, oh no, I have stuff in common with someone, so that means something. And it's like,
Doesn't mean anything.
no, you could just be like, oh my God, that's interesting. Let's discuss that thing. Like, I don't know. Again, I feel like it's juvenile. I feel like the 3 adults involved in this case acted like they were in high school.
Can I say something about that though? On the spreadsheet of things they had in common and how that was a sign that they were meant to be together. I actually think that is symbolic of Mark's conflict aversion, because really I feel like, and maybe this is just my own personal take on this and my approach to relationships, it's more interesting with someone that you have different interests. There's more, someone that you are exactly alike is fucking boring.
Like agreeing with me all the time. No, thank you.
No, I'm serious. Also, where's the growth there?
I mean, look, each relationship is going to be different. I think my point is more, I don't know, there's some idea of this being kept as a spreadsheet.
No, the spreadsheet's just gross. It's just gross.
It is gross.
Also, the coffee mug, the so invite me, the flirty, like, first of all, as a manager of people, there's also some things you just don't do. If you want to, like, I don't know, keep your job.
Yeah.
She was his boss. Like, that's an element of the story that gets acknowledged, but is not the central focus of the story. But
and you know what was kind of annoying is if they were flipped, that would have been a huge focus of the story.
Mm-hmm. But
it would have been a huge focus.
Much younger, and she's the woman who's the boss. It's kind of like the teacher who seduces the student. When it's a man, that's gross and lock him up. When it's a woman, it's like, good for that guy, good for that kid.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So what did I think about Meredith? It felt to me like Meredith was kind of like Mark in female version. So she was leaving a relationship, like a marriage. Like they knew it was over, but they were kind of still together for like, you know, the visuals or whatever. But she didn't want to be on her own. So she was waiting until she had something lined up and everything's in order. She can't even she's like, oh my God, I need help with the boxes. Sorry, I shouldn't do that. She has been murdered. Like she's having this big like reaction to like the boxes because she needs a man in her life with the boxes. Fucking deal with your own boxes. I'm sure there was more to that conversation. That was a bit harsh.
No, but that's what we heard. That's what we heard.
It just feels it felt a little bit like she was the mark. She didn't want to make the decision. The decision was forced on her because Luke made it. And she was annoyed. She was angry. She was angry at Jennair. How dare she? How dare she have told my husband what I am doing with her husband? How dare she get involved in my life? Like,
yeah.
You've been shagging her husband and you're annoyed at her for telling your husband about it. It was so bonkers to me that like she again, she's saying this and I suppose there is just we're not going to even like question this. This just is allowed to happen. And I don't know. I'm just like, we need to question this. Like that's not okay. You can't just put that out there. People being like, oh yeah, she's so right. Jennair shouldn't be contacting her employer. Why not? Why not? Like, she has ruined Jennair's life.
I actually think that some of these things that Jennair does were really clever. And
I laughed. I did laugh.
Yeah.
Some of the letter she wrote to the employer, you shouldn't hire this person. Like, and also, please don't tell her that I sent this letter. Again, it goes back to the juvenile aspect. The three of them were literally acting like teenagers.
Well, okay. And one other element of Meredith's story that she would, quote, absolutely melt for a promise ring. A promise ring? Is that a thing after like middle school?
He's still married. Again, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to be shat on by a lot of people. Maybe that's not the right phrase to use. But anyway, if they hear this. But like, he's had an affair with you. And what you think is going to solidify your relationship is a fucking ring? How many rings do you reckon Jennair had?
Yeah, I mean, well...
She got a promise ring. She presumably has an engagement ring. She presumably has a wedding ring. Maybe some other rings in the 24, 25 years they were together. But no, your promise ring. That's the one. That $600 ring, that's the one that's going to solidify something. It's just, again, it goes back to it being so juvenile. There was no critical thinking that maybe he's not making a decision. And he's like, it's so hard for me. And she's like, oh yeah, it is so hard for you. It's not so hard for him. It's like one thing that is. And that's it. And that's the only thing he's thinking about. And that's it. It was so annoying. I do think that the other thing I thought was kind of powerful and really stood out to me was when Jennair was talking about how basically her entire identity was his wife. And as you kind of we've discussed, a few times, like he moved her around. It was his job and he's helping her get set up. And it's not that he's not supporting her, but like, she's invested so much in this relationship and she just wants to see something back and she's just assuming that it'll always be there. And I think that was really hard. Because I can understand that. Like, as someone who has moved around the world for my husband's job, like left my career, like for my husband's job, I get that. But I also have my own identity, always create my own like life and do stand on my own 2 feet.
You have your own identity? Shocking. Can't picture that.
So, but I can also imagine having been in that situation, especially because this podcast, like this story happened, in 2018? 18.
18.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Reen's birthday. But
can I say on that?
Yeah.
Sorry. On that, I mean, because same thing here, right? Like I moved my family for my job and my wife had to kind of uproot from her community, from her work, from her friends, and had to build a new friend network. And it's so common that in a marriage, there's a person who makes more money than the other person. And that person has to follow their career, sometimes at the expense of the person. Sometimes that flips, right? And that happened in my marriage, where there was a period where my wife was making way more money than I was making. And so we followed her career options. And then it flipped, and then it was mine. And like that happens too. But sometimes, but what the other person is so critical that they do is that they establish an identity outside of that marriage. They develop a friend network. Whether they get a job or not, whether they have kids or not. Like, I think this was talked about in the podcast. I actually thought that was a little irrelevant whether she had kids or not, because I don't think it's dependent on having kids as part of your identity. Like, that can be a part of it. For some people, that is a part of it. But I think really at the end of the day, you need to have friends or colleagues or activities that are yours. You have to be a separate person with at least part of your existence. And if you don't, you're just putting all your eggs in one basket. And when that person is going to let you down.
But you see, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I don't think we need to lead it, and I don't think we need to link it to the negative of, well, then what if they let you down, or what if things don't work out? Like, I would never really think of it like that. I more just think of, for your own mental headspace, for your own sense of self, having that, I think, is very important. And also, kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, which is more about like the same versus like the difference and how it adds. I think having your different groups and your different interests adds an interesting element to a relationship.
Yes. That's what I mean. And I was reading about, I was reading an article. I always read these articles when I see them about people who live a super long time and like what their sort of secrets are. And there was a study that came out recently about how people who live a long time spend a lot of time in community with others. Kind of makes intuitive sense of people who end up spending their later years alone at home, just kind of have less to live for, and are more often depressed and die younger than people who have community, who have activities, who have hobbies or jobs or interests that put them out in the world, whether it's a book club or whether it's volunteer work or whether it's a real, like, actual job. It doesn't really matter. It's just about going out and being among humanity, because we're social creatures. And I think part of the problem with Jennair, one of the things I want to talk about was, I was wondering in the preview about why she was recording these videos and who they were for. We were talking about like Instagram and how that wasn't really quite a thing yet in this way in 2018. But I do feel like this story is sort of a precursor to the world we're living in now, where people are more and more just at home on their phones. And how, I mean, you can extrapolate that however you want. But I mean, there's the thing about the declining birth rate in the world. And why aren't people having more babies? It's because they're fucking doom scrolling on their phone instead of going out to bars or bowling leagues or whatever. That's going to have, long-term negative consequences on humanity. So I'm taking this really far.
Well, I also think there's an element of like, even if you were in a couple, first of all, if you're doom scrolling on your phone instead of like, doing something a bit more interesting. But also the other thing is, if you are, this whole like focus on how online dating is kind of like Netflix, where you have so much to choose from. You'll spend an hour looking for a movie and then you'll be like, well, fuck it, it's too late now. And you won't actually do anything about it. And it's the same element with like all of these online sites. You're like, oh, no. You're so critical of everything that you never make a decision and nothing ever moves forward, or everyone is so critical that nothing ever happens. And I think there's an element of that as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right.
What did you make of Mark saying what he used to do before introducing her to people was to kind of warn them that, she's like unique and she's an acquired taste, and, she might say some things, kind of warning people about her? What did you make of that? Like, he's saying that like as a now thing. He's not saying that like back then. This is him post growth.
Yeah. That
saying,
gets at
I used to
something I
do
wanted
this.
to say about it.
Isn't it so weird?
I didn't hear a lot of growth in him.
No.
I didn't hear a lot of self-reflection.
When you teach your kids how to say sorry and they break something or they whatever and they say, sorry. And like, there is no feeling behind it. They say the words. There is no feeling. It is the words that they know that you want to hear. Similar to how when Meredith needed words, needed reassurance, needed whatever, he was like, I know what you need. I'll tell you. Or looks at Jennair and says, oh, you're breaking. Oh, I don't like this. Oh, I know what you need. Crack open that door a little bit. You stay there now, pet. I still love you a little bit. I'm mad about Meredith now. But you're still in my heart. I can't say you're not. I can't tell you that you're gone. What would that do to me? Poor old Mark.
That's the thing. The insensitive cruelty of wanting to have both. And not seeing how this is destroying one person, which ended up destroying two people. And being so oblivious to that because he had his piece on the side and he was going to get her that promise ring. I wanted to mention real quickly, I think her name was Nyla Neely. She was an acquaintance that Jennair met who Jennair reached out to about suicide prevention support.
Yes, it was like a former colleague of hers.
And this woman, what a remarkable person this was, where she was talking about like what language to use, what to say, what not to say.
Fascinating.
That was I don't know. There were a handful of these folks who popped up throughout. I also thought it was interesting to hear from the divorce coach, who we talked about. She was in the preview of the first episode.
Sheila Brennan?
Yeah, Sheila Brennan. Yeah. And she popped up throughout. Yes.
I know a Sheila Brennan, actually. No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
Maybe I do.
But then we also heard from Beverly, who was Jennair's childhood friend, one of her only childhood friends. And this gets to just the research. So nobody from Jennair's family, no one from Meredith's family, including her husband, talked or participated in this podcast. Those would have been interesting people to hear from. Especially Luke. I feel like Luke, Meredith's husband, played a pretty central role in this. But I was very curious about like what was his angle? Like what was going on in his brain? What was he thinking about? Why was he
wanted
so
nothing
sort of
to do with it. He didn't engage.
Why?
Sure, he knew he was out. They were already broken up, and he wasn't. Okay. He wasn't as reliant on Meredith as Jennair was on Mark. That's
a good point. Yeah. Anyway, my point was, okay, so we didn't hear from those people. We did hear from a lot of other people. We heard from, like I said, Mike and Beverly, so Jennair and Mark's long-time friends. This woman, Nyla. We heard from the divorce coach. We heard, obviously, Dr. Romani. And then we also had access to, in addition to all those videos of Jennair and her suicide letter, we also had those letters she sent off to like Meredith's employers. We had all of this sort of primary source information that was just, and all the recordings that she made of Mark, of Meredith, of Jennair and Mark. To put that into 6 episodes, like the volume of content that was poured into these 6 episodes, while at the same time it was fairly heavily narrated, which was something that I particularly in contrast to The Witness, the last one we talked about, where it was pretty much all just almost exclusively it was hearing from Joey O'Callahan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whereas here, there was a lot of the narrator, a lot of the host in it.
But I know it was
what
never.
What did you think of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like with The Witness, he was telling a story kind of from start to finish.
Yeah.
In his own words. But you couldn't do that here because it would only be in Jennair's words, and that would not have given the full picture because of the complexity, I suppose, of the story. Not that the Joey O'Callahan story wasn't complex. It was...
That's kind of sad. It was a pretty complex story.
It was a lot. But I suppose because he was... And I think we discussed this when we were discussing Witness. He was telling everything. He was telling his goods and bads. Like, he wasn't just painting himself in rose-tinted glasses. And I don't think Jennair was either, to be fair. I mean, there was elements of like, well, I've always done everything for you. But then also she was talking about how she needs to end Meredith. So like, you know, it's not as if she's trying to pretend she's some sort of saint here. But
right.
I thought that was interesting. I thought what the unique element we had here with the narration, we didn't get it in Witness. I don't think we needed it. The unique element we had here is it starts with the end. So we know in episode 1 what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But the focus of the narration is really on the analysis of each situation as opposed to a telling nearly of the story. It's more on the analysis of it, especially when Dr. Romani's involved. Like, there might be some context obviously brought in when they have different people coming in to speak about it. When the host and when Dr. Romani are speaking about it, it's more about the analysis of the situation.
I think that's true. I also think I think that's the type of thing that your mileage could really vary based on how much you are willing to sort of go along with and agree with some of the things they're saying, or find their analysis to be appropriate, to be thoughtful, versus sort of armchair quarterbacking what happened. Like, I thought that this was, from my perspective, this was a very well-made podcast. I thought it was very thoughtful. I thought the analysis was strong. But I think in some ways this was a type of structure we've heard before. The subject matter was unique. Some of the elements of it were very unique. But I don't know. I thought that could have gone really awry. I don't think it did. I think this was compelling.
I feel like one thing that was interesting was in the first bonus episode with Barbara and Dr. Romani. Barbara mentioned that she actually had interviewed loads of psychotherapists. Is that the right term? And it was Dr. Romani who she was like, a psychologist, sorry. And Dr. Romani who she was like, oh yeah, this is the right person for this. So I thought that was interesting to know that there was a particular person she was looking for. But what I would also wonder is, was there a person or was there a perspective she was looking for?
Sure. But maybe. That's fair. But I appreciated that because that was one of several moments where I thought Barbara kind of showed her notes. And I love that. The other one, so the other example was when she was talking about Mark's book and donating the proceeds, and where she sort of, I thought, awkwardly described how she asked the charity that he said he was donating the money to say how much he donated, and then she asked him to kind of show her his revenue from the book, and acknowledging that they matched. And like, she could have done that in several different ways. I thought she did it in a kind of a clunky way that I thought really stood out. Like, hey, look, I did my work here, and I want you to know. And I'm not just giving that, to me, that was her saying, I'm not giving this guy a pass and just believing him.
I agree.
But
I noted
I
noted that too. And I was like, okay, I see what you did here. You don't want this to just like go in and work really well, so it'll just land and like it'll work with the podcast. This is like, hey, FYI, note, I have done this. I've checked.
Yeah.
This has happened. Interesting that people didn't want his money.
That was interesting. Speaking of what people think, do you want to talk about some reviews?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. And I think actually we've found it pretty hard as well. It's pretty hard to find a review of the story that isn't critical of the main players in the story.
Sure.
One that I'm seeing now, Abigail Gabble, from 2 years ago. I've listened to this podcast twice, which is very rare for me because it was that absorbing. I find that fascinating. There's like a massive thread that was created by someone his tagline is, I'm shook about bad thing. And it's this whole big long thing. I'm not going to go into it. Basically, I've never been as affected by a show as this. I literally cried listening. Perhaps it was hearing her tortured, haunting voice on these recordings. Perhaps it was because I had a friend who was the wife of a local mega church pastor, married since high school, and he was divorcing her after finding someone new. And like Jennair, her sole identity was being the pastor's wife, and she couldn't reconcile not being seen as such, which led to her untimely death. Perhaps it's because so many people long to be loved and wrap themselves in the identity of others and lose themselves.
Sure.
But what other true crime podcasts have had a visceral effect on you? And basically the thread is basically people being like, I know I need to have some empathy for Meredith, but, or like, I know Jennair did this, but it's Mark. You know, this is the kind of thing. Like another person, Renee Bob says he lost me with sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I feel like that's an interesting point because there's a version of this story where Meredith is the homewrecker. And I didn't think she came across that way here. I thought this was a much more kind of nuanced version of that story. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a version of the story where it's like she swoops in, young, pretty boss, and breaks up this marriage and causes the older wife, to go nuts.
But honestly, do you not think that trope is so broken now? Do you not think people see through it?
Yeah.
Like,
but
because
I think that's
really
why,
I think that homewrecker trope of the young girl coming in and breaking up the marriage has been broken because people realize that's such a like misogynistic like viewpoint of a married couple where a woman comes in and breaks up the marriage. Like, if you're the married couple, you as the married person own the right, the responsibility. Like, if Meredith hadn't been married, I would say, honestly, she has done nothing wrong because we don't know the lies he was playing to her.
Sure.
And I said this in the preview. So I don't think that the home wrecking whore is not the line I ever got from this.
No,
Mark
but I
was
think
the
like
one
that might
who
have
was
been
going in. Mark was the one who was playing the game here.
Yes, I agree. But I also think that might have been the Dateline spin on this story.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
but I also go back to it saying like I think it's an old trope. I think it's like
for sure
the misogynistic trope of like it must be the woman because a man couldn't possibly say no if a woman, like, the man has the ability and has the responsibility to say no if he is in the marriage. And
but the sirens are irresistible, Dee. The sirens are irresistible. It's not that old of a trope. Anyway,
so then another person basically says Mark was a weak man without an ounce of a backbone or integrity. And then Supermanda responds saying, I think he had way more backbone than people are giving him credit for. The guy was out getting jobs in a very competitive industry. There are plenty of very gaslighting and narcissistic guys who don't like conflict. It doesn't mean that they are spineless. Don't conflate lack of integrity with fragility and weakness.
Well, it does actually, though.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay.
You can pretend to be a strong person, but you're not if you can't. Anyway.
All right.
And then someone just says, Ruby Widow 80 says, it was really, really sad. And I think maybe that's the review that we need to leave it on, because at the end of the day, we can go back and forth and we can argue and we can disagree on how things are laid out, and we can judge maybe people's actions or the words that they use or whatever. But really, at the end of the day, it is just really sad because regardless of the bad decisions that all three of them made, two people ended up dead. And I thought this podcast was really well done, though. Structure was great.
I agree.
It was addictive. I will be listening to it again and I will be recommending it. Will you recommend it to a friend?
I will. And I think part of why is because, and I think this was, we didn't talk about this, but just to note, to echo, I guess, in a way what that person was saying was, Jennair just seemed like she had so many amazing qualities. And there were so many things about her that were so remarkable. And it's just so sad that this is how it ended. And I feel like that's, I don't know, there was a comment once about how she would have made an amazing private investigator.
Yeah.
And yeah, she would. She would. She seemed incredibly smart and resourceful and creative. And yeah, it's just so sad. But yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely recommend this. I think it is very sad, but I thought it was compelling. I thought it was very well made. And yes, it's sort of the oldest story, but I thought it was told in a very interesting, unique way.
Don't forget to leave us a comment and tell us, do you agree? Is your empathy and your sympathy lying with someone else? Do you want to counter argue with us? If you do, please join our Patreon so that we can have a discussion and hear your side. We love hearing the other side. We are not conflict averse. We love a bit of healthy, friendly conflict. Don't we, Jeff?
I don't, actually. I disagree strongly.
Don't mind him. He's just being annoying. While you're there, leave some comments on Spotify or Instagram, wherever you can find us. Rate us. Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, please 5 stars. It really helps us get the word out. We've just surpassed a huge milestone for the podcast in terms of listens, and we want to keep this going. Thank you so much to everyone that's been supporting us. While you're at it, tell a friend, share it on your socials, get the word out. We really appreciate it. And now for something completely different, Jeff. We are going to jump into a neo-Nazi extremist network. Does that feel relaxing and different enough to you?
It feels different. I don't know about relaxing.
Indeed. Well, we're going to hear about this extraordinary case of a Canadian journalist who infiltrates an international neo-Nazi extremist network. We're going to be listening to White Hot Hate, Season 1 from CBC.
That's on the next So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.